24 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Robin, have you ever been with a child and the child is learning math? And I know you could have been a math teacher, actually. You just didn't go that direction. But you say, well, how much is 25 plus 5 plus 10 plus 1? How much is that? And then the child, I don't know, right?
Yes.
Then you give them a quarter, a nickel, a dime, and a penny and say, it's 41 cents. Am I right? 41?
I don't know. I didn't add it up.
41 cents. So the money is easier to grasp, I think, for a young person just learning math than the actual numbers that represent the money. And the other question I have is, when your children were growing up, did they get allowances?
Yes, they did.
They did. So, and did you increase it like every year? And did they have chores that they had to do?
No, they didn't really have chores. They just had to, make sure their room was okay. But I just gave them money, and then when they ran out of allowance and they needed other things, I just was there with my money for them.
Well, you and Ronnie were good parents.
Yes, as were you with your son.
I thought I was, but I wasn't really good with the whole allowance thing, because I kind of just would go to Toys R Us and I'd say, what do you want?
Oh, me too,
just
sure.
get something.
I was the same way. They got everything.
Ron Leiber is on the phone, and boy, this book makes sense. I won't have a chance to do it over, obviously, and my son is doing way better than me with money anyway right now at 28 years old.
Yeah, my kids are too.
But Ron Leiber has written this book called The Opposite of Spoiled, Raising Kids Who Are Grounded, Generous, and Smart About Money. I love all those things, grounded, generous, and smart. Isn't that a great 3 things to talk about with money?
Oh, yeah.
Ron is the Your Money columnist for the New York Times. He wrote the Green column for the Wall Street Journal, New York Times bestselling author, and the book, again, is The Opposite of Spoiled. Good morning, Ron. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in a hotel room in Chicago, Illinois. This is my hometown, and I'm about to go back to my alma mater tonight, the Francis Parker School, to talk about the book and everything I learned writing it.
Oh, wow. So where did you move to?
I live in Brooklyn, New York now, and I've been there for about 20 years.
Oh, wow. So it's good to be back in Chicago?
It is great to be back home.
That's cool. Well, tell me about yourself. When you were younger, were you a smart kid with money?
I don't know if I was any smarter or dumber than average. I was just a kid who was curious. I was the kid who snooped on his parents' tax returns. And I also learned a lot along the way because our family had a change in social class. What happened with us was that there was a divorce, and, that's always a difficult financial situation when you turn one household into two. And there was an income disruption, too, in our household. And so things changed pretty dramatically. My brother and sister and I went on scholarship. We were on financial aid all through college, and that was a wake-up call and a learning experience for kind of what it's like to run the numbers, to have to go into somebody and actually ask them for more. And to me, that was a formative experience. Oh,
wow. And in what way were you asking for more? You mean a raise for yourself, that kind of thing?
No, we were going into the financial aid office each year and sitting down with the dean, my mother and I.
Oh.
And, every year there would be an offer, and every year we would come back with a counter offer. And we didn't have much leverage, right, because I didn't want to drop out or transfer. But we would try to make it clear to him, why it was that the things that they were asking of us weren't quite what we were going to be capable of doing. And then we would try and sort of meet halfway. And, this amounted to sometimes a 4-figure amount of money, even 25 years ago. That was a difference that made a difference for us at the time.
Wow. And as kids, we learned that parable, I guess it's called a parable or fable, whatever, about the grasshopper, and was it the grasshopper and the ant or something? And one of them is saving and the other one is not saving or something like that. And we either grasp that as it applies to ourselves, or we just think it's a cute story or whatever. I think I was the one who thought it was a cute story. So the lessons you learned were from the need to learn. Right?
Exactly. And when you talk about those parables, right, I'm a big believer in telling stories, particularly family stories about, struggle or triumph in the past. These are things that can have a lot of impact on kids. But what we really need to do is let them practice. And what my mother was doing by dragging me along to the financial aid office was allowing me to practice with real money and big, consequential, grown-up decisions and conversations. And the point I'm trying to make in the book and in my writing for the Times and, when I'm out on the road talking to people is that we need to give kids more opportunities to practice with their allowance, to practice with the household budget, to practice participating in the household charity allocation so that they learn the things that they need to learn so that they will have the habits they need by the time they are adults.
How do you teach a child? Now, I was not good with this whole thing. Sounds like Robin was way better at it than I was with raising my son. But how would you, in the real world, if you don't do your job, you get fired.
Yeah.
How do you fire if the child's job is to grab the garbage and put it out of the curb? How do you? What is your leverage? Using your word. How do you?
Sure.
What's the fear?
The leverage that parents think they have is allowance, and 80 to 85% of parents tie the distribution of allowance to the completion of chores because they want to do what you said. They want to foster a work ethic and set up consequences for work that is not done or is not done satisfactorily, which is often the case with chores. My feeling about that is that if you set things up that way, the kids are going to come to you eventually and say, you know what, I don't actually need the money this week. I don't even want it. And so I'm not going to do the chores this time around.
Good.
Right?
Yeah. So
you're in a real pickle, right? Because of course they have to do the chores, but you've set up this expectation that the money is tied to the chores. To me, it's much better to let allowance stand alone and treat it not as like an entitlement or a distribution. Money's just a teaching tool in the context of allowance. We give it to them because it is a tool for learning valuable skills. And if we want to punish our kids for screwing up the chores or forgetting to do them, there are all sorts of valuable privileges that they have that we can take away. We can take away the car keys. We can take away the cell phone. We can take away the screen time. We can ban them from sports practice. I can tell you right quick, the kids who are serious athletes do not want to miss the practice and ride the bench on the weekend during the game. So there's a lot of leverage we have, and it doesn't need to involve using money as a fine.
So have you worked with anybody who would be considered wealthy? And do you remember this? I don't know if you're old enough to. I just looked at your picture. You look pretty young. But the show Beverly Hillbillies. Do you remember that? Uncle Jed was a millionaire, but he still gave Jethro $1 a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So it's funny that you ask because I did not spend a ton of time talking to truly wealthy families for this book because I wanted it to be as accessible as possible to people of all income levels. But the families that I did speak to that were wealthy were families that had increased their income substantially from one generation to next. So they grew up as kids with much less and now all of a sudden found themselves in a situation of having much more. And they did not want their kids to suffer for that, which sounds like a ridiculous notion, right? But what they meant by that is that they didn't want their kids to be entitled, they didn't want their kids to be spoiled, they didn't want their kids to have absurd expectations, and they worry a lot about getting that right. And they have some very, interesting wisdom to offer up about how they kind of deliberately downscale the things that they can do, even if they can afford to do more, because they don't want their kids coming to expect to be served, popsicles poolside at the Four Seasons while somebody sprays them with Evian.
Right.
But you actually afford.
Yeah, and we all know the guy or the girl who had a teaching job or a firefighter job or some blue collar position, and yet at retirement or in their later years they were really doing well. They knew how to handle their money, and then somebody else may have actually had a really good job and they're not doing as well because of the smart approach to hanging on to money. That if we can instill this at childhood, it's probably the best place to do this. Probably the best gift you can give your child. Mm-hmm. So I want to kind of take off at that point when we come back. We have to take a little break, and then we'll be right back. The book, again, is called The Opposite of Spoiled. Ron Leiber calling us from a hotel room in Chicago.
Yep.
Where it's cold. I'm just going to guess that, just based on the news. We'll take.
I love the cold. I'm a Viking. I grew up in the tundra.
Yay!
Oh wow. We'll take a little. We'll take a little break and be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. We'll start out with periods of rain this morning, then clouds will break for some sun this afternoon as it becomes windy and somewhat cooler. Highs will range from the low 60s in the northernmost part of the zone to 71 in the southernmost part. And mainly clear, breezy, and colder tonight with lows ranging from 38 in a few inland spots to 52 along the coast. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, breezy, and cool with a high between 62 and 66. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Are you tired of not using your home's outdoor space for entertaining or relaxation because of all the bugs and leaves? Consider adding a beautiful screen room or glass enclosure. We are Superior Aluminum and Design, a family-owned and operated business with 20 years experience in the aluminum industry, and we are accredited by the Better Business Bureau. If you appreciate superior workmanship, call Superior Aluminum and Design at 817-8058 or visit us on the web at superiораluminumdesign.com.
Good credits, bad credits. It's none of our business because we're not an auto dealer. We're not a bank. We're not your mother. We're OcalaForSale.com. Marion County's marketplace for cars, trucks, and SUVs. We've got thousands of sellers standing by to take your call. No middleman. But hurry, don't walk, don't run. Just sit down and log on to OcalaForSale.com. Prices and inventory change daily. Offer does not include dealer upcharge. Undercutting, rust-proofing, factory surcharge, or delivery fee. See website for details.
All right, 13 minutes before 11 o'clock, Ron Leiber is on the phone. His book is called The Opposite of Spoiled, Raising Kids Who Are Grounded, Generous, and Smart About Money. So I want to make sure I understand who the book is for and what is actually in the book. Obviously, with 10 minutes left, we won't be able to tell you everything, so you have to get the book. And in fact, the book was sent to us, so I'll be able to give it away in about 10 minutes when we're done with the interview. Ron, are you there? Okay,
I'm still here.
Okay, good. I knew you stepped away for a little bit. I was trying to fill in the blank there. So during the break, we were talking about the fact that somebody who is smart with their money can always make it grow, right? And so do you cover that? I'm guessing that's a big part of what... You know what I also want to ask you about? The generous part, the giving part, because I think that's an important part of life.
Yes.
Sure. So we can cover all those things with the allowance. You know, on the cover of the book, there's 3 jars: a give jar, a save jar, and a spend jar. The point of the save jar is to give kids the sense of what it's like to watch the money grow, to feel the satisfaction of that happening, and being able to save for something that's really important to them. You know, it's important when you're 6 or 8 or 10 years old. It's certainly important if you're saving for college, and it becomes essential when you graduate from college and you become responsible for your own retirement. Most people are these days. There's not that many pensions anymore. You are going to have to do it yourself, and it is our job to teach them. So you asked also about giving and generosity. Same thing's true. Devote a part of the allowance to charity. Give kids the ability to make decisions about the causes that are important to them, and make the act of generosity something that you do regularly. And, you know, maybe it happens in the church plate on the weekend, but it can also happen through allowance where kids make their own decisions about where the money goes. And they can even participate in the family's charitable budgeting, you know, each year, where they help the parents decide which part of the household income is going to be devoted to what causes.
You know, so I'm going to ask you advice for me, because I have a thing with the giving thing. I have certain things that I like to give to, and I'm at this point in my life, I have it regularly coming out of my bank account so that the organizations that I support. But then you run into the people who come up to you in the parking lot and say, "Hey, man, you got $1?"
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, how do you approach that? And I'm not trying to pick on people who genuinely need money, but sometimes you don't know who's
genuine.
So, I mean, do you just keep a few dollars in your wallet or in your pocket? You know, what do you do? What is your advice on that?
Sure. So I think when kids are really young and they're just getting used to the idea that there are people in need who need help, I really think the best thing we can do in that circumstance is to actually give $1 out. And, you know, we all have every bit of understanding that that may not be the best thing for that person at that time if they are mentally ill or if they have addiction issues. But to me, the most important thing there is to model generosity for children at a young age. Once they're old enough, you know, 6, 7, 8, to begin to understand why it is that giving money may not be the best thing at that moment, you can do something else. And I wrote in the book about a family in Oakland, California that makes these bags that they keep in their house to give to people, you know, on the median of the roads who ask them for money at red lights. And they put things there that they think that these people might need. Things like tissues or hand warmers or protein bars or bottles of water or a deck of playing cards. These kids came up with the ideas themselves. They're only 8 or 10 or 12.
That's a great
They
idea.
wanted to do something in the moment, and I think that's a lovely instinct, and so that's one thing that you might try.
That is a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea. Okay, so that problem is solved.
I like how you also include the word grounded in there, because you can't not be grounded in order to have a very fulfilling life. You have to have your generosity comes from being grounded. Your sense of being a team player comes from being grounded. Everything good comes from being grounded.
I think that's true. It's so easy these days with so much social media in all of our faces to come to the conclusion that there's something about our life and about our bank account that is somehow wanting, because everybody's putting the best version of themselves out there, and all you see is everybody else is awesome, right? And so it's easy to think that you have somehow, come up short, particularly if you're a kid and you don't have context. So it's up to parents to, provide some sort of counter programming to that, to help kids recognize that what they have is quite often special and unique in its own way. That your family stands for something special and unique. That there are fun, amazing things that you do together, and that that's just fine. And it's possible to do things differently when you're a grown-up, but that there are probably plenty of things that you have now for which you really ought to have a fair bit of gratitude.
The book, again, The Opposite of Spoiled. It's a well-written, well-thought-out book that'll give you some ideas that maybe you never thought about before as far as your children. And the children, we're not talking just 5 and 6 years old. We're talking college-age kids as well. You cover that as well. And we do have listeners calling in. Are you okay with taking callers?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ron. By the way, there's a little delay between the time you say something and the time we hear you, and vice versa. So I don't want you to think we're talking over you on purpose, and I apologize if it sounded like that. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air with Ron Leiber.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I missed a little bit of the beginning part of the show. I don't know if you covered this or not, but years back when my kids were growing up, going through the schools and that, I always we rewarded them for report cards. Like, A's were at $50, and B's were at 25, and C's were at 10, and if you got an E, there was a minus on it. But it seemed to work pretty good. What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot of research that's shown that if you pay kids for grades, it actually reduces their intrinsic motivation. That's a fancy academic term for, just the desire to do well.
Oh, wow.
I think we want to do the best that we can to suggest to kids that doing well in school and finding academic interests that they are passionate about is something worth doing in its own right for the good feeling that success delivers. And, it's better to give them money just for practice and allowance.
Wow. Now, talk to us about, like, when you're on a vacation or something like that, and you and your wife are probably spending more money than normal. The kids are probably wanting to. What are the rules for that? What would you suggest?
I'm sorry, the rules for vacation.
Like when you're on a vacation, or even the very fact of going on a vacation. I mean, so if you go on a vacation when you're older, and you're going to spend, let's say, $2,000 to go to Disney World, which is not unreasonable. I mean, it's an expensive place. So you're in Disney World for a few days, and you're $2,000 poorer. But you've had this wonderful experience. So how do you weigh the difference between what to do and what to spend money on?
Sure. There's a bunch of ways to go at that question depending on how much money you have. If you don't have very much at all, a vacation of any sort, but particularly one at Disneyland, could be a once in a lifetime or once in a decade experience. And you want to bring the kids in on the planning. Do you really think it's going to be worth it? And if we can only do one thing every couple of years, what is most important? What's going to be the most fun? And everybody should be in on planning it. And then when you're making the trade-offs along the way, when you're budgeting, when you're not going out to eat, when you're buying, the cheapest food or not going to the movies, you want to remind yourself of how terrific that experience is going to be. Lots of research shows that that's a helpful thing. Now, if you're a middle or upper middle class family, maybe you have enough to go to the vacation, without doing too much planning or saving ahead of time. But you want to make this an exercise for your kids in money management the same way that everything should be. And so when you go, you might say, okay, you've got a $50 budget for souvenirs for this week-long trip. Here's your prepaid debit card that you can use anywhere that they take Visa or MasterCard, and you're going to decide what you get, but that is all you're going to get.
Oh, I like that idea.
So you have to really think about it, right? And then if you're a wealthy family, and you can afford to go to the Four Seasons for every trip, I think you would still might want to think about, deliberate downgrades that you can do for some of your breaks, because you don't want your kids to be the kinds of kids that come back to school and, talk about the variances of the poolside service at the Four Seasons and various resorts around the world.
Mm-hmm. One of Robin's pet peeves, and it's a good one, is that some children are spoiled in their insistence on getting brand names, like the Nike sneakers versus the dollar store sneakers or whatever. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a materialistic problem, or keeping up with the Joneses problem. Yes. Do you have any advice for that?
Sure. Look, there is no sin in coveting things. This is a normal part of being a kid, and it's a normal part of being an adult. We all want to fit in. We all want to look like we belong, and it's certainly true for middle school kids and adolescents. So that's perfectly understandable. But, it's also perfectly fine to say to kids, look, we have limits. There are certain brands that we are simply not going to let you wear because we don't think it's an appropriate thing for a child your age to be walking around in, name your favorite expensive brand name. Now, however, we do want to give you some discretion. We want to give you some choice. Your clothing budget is going to allow you to have a few really nice things, and you are going to have to make the decision about what those are, and we're going to trust that, you have the ability and the smarts to divide up the $500 that we decide to give you for all of your underwear, snow boots, rain boots, coat, athletic apparel, gym shoes, prom dresses, and everything else for the entire school year. And you can decide, whether you want the fancy things and only a few of them, or whether you want to have a lot more to wear, but to not be walking around flashing any fancy labels.
All right, you've got some good advice. The book is called The Opposite of Spoiled. The number right now to get the book, I have one copy here that was sent to us, so you can have it. The number is 622-9622. That's pretty smart, is to get a free book.
Yeah.
But the rest of us do have to buy it. And Ron, how do we do that? Do you have a website?
Sure. The best way to buy it right now, if you're trying to buy it online, is at barnesandnoble.com. They have the best inventory. But I also encourage people to go patronize their independent booksellers. These people are terrific. Some of them are struggling to stay in business, and I do whatever I can to support them.
Okay, let me real quickly give this book away. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Judy, and I have 3 young grandchildren.
Oh, you're going to love the book, Judy. It'll be waiting for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron, do you have a website before we say goodbye?
I do. RonLeiber.com. R-O-N as in Nancy, L-I-E-B as in boy, E-R.com. You can also go to theoppositeofspoiled.com and sign up for my newsletter. I have many more acts of journalism I intend to commit in the area of parents and money, and I encourage people to follow along.
You're a motivational guy for sure, Ron. Thank you so much for being on the air with us today, and come back anytime. Stay warm in your hometown.
I love it here in the cold. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
From the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Karen McHugh. Jordan strikes back at ISIS with new air strikes in retaliation for the burning death of their